Hey, good morning. Welcome to Vlogmas number 12. We are headed over to the church to make some copies for Sunday school. We stopped by to get a soda, a Diet Dr. Pepper, which is my favorite. So we stopped here to get that. And then while I'm making copies, I'm going to have my husband Kevin. He is going to take the camera and he is going to do a walk around our property, and he wanted to see how far it would be to walk the whole property as far as mileage, because we want to do a walking path around the church. So he's going to go out and try to see that mileage to see how far that will. He's estimating about a mile each way, so that would be an awesome walking path. You know, that way you can just keep walking mileage wise. So anyway, join us today for Vlogmas number 12. God to the rescue. Joseph and his brothers grew old and died, but their children's children stayed on in Egypt, where they became a very large family. Later on, a new king began to rule, but this Pharaoh didn't remember Joseph, and he didn't like God's people. He made them into slaves and beat them and made them work harder and harder. God's people cried out to God to rescue them, and God heard them. He remembered his promise to Abraham. He would look after his people, and he would find a way to set them free. One day Moses was looking after sheep when something caught his eye. A bush was behaving very oddly, and it was flickering with flames. But its leaves weren't burning up. He took a closer look. "Moses," boomed a big voice. Moses leapt back. The bush was talking to him. "I have heard my people's cries," God said. "I have seen their tears, so I have come down to rescue them. Go to Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go." Moses was afraid, but God said, "I will be with you." So Moses went to Pharaoh, and Moses began, "God says." "God?" said Pharaoh. "Never heard of him." Moses kept going. "God says, let his people go for free." "Why should I?" Pharaoh said. "Don't want to." "Won't." So he didn't. So God gave Pharaoh 10 warnings called plagues. First, God turned the river Nile into blood. No one could drink the water, but still Pharaoh could not let them go. So God made frogs come hopping and leaping and jumping in your bed frogs, in your hair frogs, in your soup frogs, all over everywhere kind of frogs. "Make them go away," Pharaoh screamed. "Then your people can go." So God took the frogs away. But Pharaoh changed his mind. "You can't go," he said. Then God sent zillions of gnats. But still Pharaoh said no. So then God sent swarms of flies buzzing in your eye, flies. After that, sickness and horrible boils, and huge hailstorms, and a storm of locusts, and darkness when it should have been day, until it seemed that the whole world, creation and everything, was coming undone, falling back into the darkness and emptiness and nothingness. But each time Pharaoh said, "Make it stop, and then I will let them go." And each time God made it stop. Pharaoh changed his mind and said, "Actually, no, you can't go." Finally, Moses warned Pharaoh, "Obey God, or he will have to send the worst thing of all." Pharaoh just laughed. So God said, "The oldest boy in each family of Egypt must die, but my people will be safe." God told the people to take their best lamb, to kill it, and put some of its blood on the front doors. When God passes over the house, Moses explained, God will see the blood and know that the lamb died instead of you. That night it was just as God had said. Suddenly, the darkness echoing down the corridors of the palace, came a blood-curdling scream. Pharaoh's oldest son had died. At last, Pharaoh did what God said. "Get out," Pharaoh shouted. "Just go." And so that very night, Moses and God's people fled out of Egypt and out of slavery. They were free at last, and God's people would always remember this great rescue and call it Passover. But an even greater rescue was coming. Many years later, God was going to do it again. He was going to come down once more to rescue his people, but this time God was going to set them free forever. All right, day 11, God makes a way. From Moses and the Red Sea, from Exodus 14 through 15. Moses and God's people escaped out of Egypt and into the wilderness. They didn't know the way, but God knew the way, and he would show them. I will bring you to a new home, a special land, God promised, and I will look after you, and I am with you. God sent a big cloud for them to follow, a pillar of smoke stretching up to the sky. It moved in front of them as far as they walked and shaded them from blazing heat of the day. And when it was time to rest, it stopped. All through the cold desert nights, it kept them warm, glowing like fire. God led his people through the desert and to the edge of the great sea. They were just wondering how to cross it when suddenly they heard a terrible thundering and pounding. It sounded almost like horse hoofs. They shaded their eyes to look back and screamed. It was Pharaoh and his army were coming to get them. Pharaoh had changed his mind again. "Get my slaves back," he screeched, and charged out into the desert after them with 600 of his fastest horsemen and every single chariot in Egypt. What were God's people going to do? In front of them was a big sea. It was so big there was no way around it, but there was no way through it, and it was too deep. They didn't have any boats, so they couldn't sail across, and they couldn't swim across because it was too far and they would drown. And they couldn't turn back because Pharaoh was chasing them. They could see the flashing swords now glinting in the baking sun and the dust clouds and chariot after scary chariot surging towards them. So they did the only thing that there was left to do: panic. "We're going to die," they shrieked. "Don't be afraid," Moses said. "But there's nothing we can do," they screamed. "God knows you can't do anything," Moses said. "God will do it for you. Trust him and watch." "But there's no way out," they cried. "God will make a way," Moses said. After a minute, it would have been over. But then the strangest thing happened. God made the pillar of smoke move. It moved behind his people and hid them from the Egyptians. Then God sent a strong east wind to blow all night long. It blew on the water of the big sea. It blew it to the left and it blew it to the right until it blew to two towering walls of water. And there, right through the middle of the sea, a muddy pathway opened up, and God's people walked across dry land. When the Egyptians tried to follow, the walls of water crashed back down on them and swallowed them up. God's people were safe, and they danced and laughed and sang and thanked God. When there had been no way out, God had made a way. Many years later, once again, God was going to make a way where there was no way. From the beginning, God's children had been running from him and hiding. God knew his children could never be happy without him, but they couldn't get back to him by themselves. They were lost, and they didn't know the way back. But God knew the way, and one day he would show them. All right, day 12, which means that we are all caught up. It is 10 ways to be perfect. Exodus 16 through 17 and Exodus 19 through 40. All right, 10 ways to be perfect. So there they all were, grannies and granddads, babies, uncles, aunts, children, moms, and dads. Out there in the middle of the desert, they had blisters from all the walking, and they were hungry and thirsty and much, much too hot. "We don't like it," they said. "It stinks," and so do they, for that matter, because no one had taken a bath in weeks. Now remember, because this is something they'd forgotten, God had done amazing things for his people. He'd hidden them inside a cloud, and he'd moved the sea. He'd set them free. But God's people still weren't happy. They didn't care about being free. Wasn't it better when they were slaves? At least they had lots of nice food to eat. God doesn't want us to be happy, they said. It was the same lie that Adam and Eve had heard all those years before. God has brought us out here to kill us. God doesn't love us. But they didn't know God very well, did they? Every day of their journey, God kept on showing his people how well he would look after them. If they would trust him and obey him when they were hungry, God made the sky rain with food, bread coming down from heaven. What is it? They asked each other. They didn't know, so they called it What It Is, which of course is a very good name for something when you don't know what it is. When they were thirsty and started quarreling, God made water flow from a rock. Moses called that place Quarreling because that seemed like a good name too. And still, God's children didn't trust him or do what he said. They thought they could do a better job of looking after themselves and making themselves happy. But God knew there was no such thing as happiness without him. So God led them to a tall mountain. God wanted to talk to his people and show them what he was like. He wanted to help them to know him better and tell them about the special land he was going to give them. The whole earth belongs to me, God said, but I have chosen you. You are my special family. I want you to live in a way that shows everyone else what I'm like, so they can know me too. God called Moses up to a mountain. The great mountain shook, a thick cloud fell, and thunder roared. Lightning crackled, and God gave Moses 10 rules called commandments. I want you to love me more than anything else in all the world, and know that I love you too. God told them that's the most important thing of all. God gave them other rules like don't make yourself pretend gods, don't kill people or steal or lie. The rules showed God's people how to live and how to be close to him and how to be happy. They showed how life worked best. God promises to always look after you, Moses said. Will you love him and keep these rules? We can do it. Yes, we promise. But they were wrong. They couldn't do it. No matter how hard they tried, they could never keep God's rules all the time. God knew they couldn't, and he wanted them to know it too. Only one person could keep all the rules, and many years later, God would send him to stand in their place and to be perfect for them. Because the rules couldn't save them, only God could save them. All right, so that was day 10, 11, and 12. So let's go ahead and hang those on the tree. I hope that you are still with me. So let's hang up day number 10, which was God to the rescue. All right, day 11, God makes a way. And day number 12, which brought us up to current. Okay, so 10 ways to be perfect, the 10 commandments, the way God wants us to live. Okay, our tree is looking beautiful. Let me show you up close. Doesn't that look good? Our Advent tree. All right, thank you so much for joining me for Advent. Day 1 through, is this 12? Day 1 through 12, yes. So we have made it day 1 through day 12. I hope that you stick it out to day 24, 12 more days. All right, Christmas is coming soon. All right, so you guys have an awesome day. I hope that you stick around for the vlog, which is Vlogmas number 12 today. And we'll see you soon. All right, talk to you later. Bye.
Hey everyone, this is Pastor Kevin, or Kevin Lauder from Lautarlife, and we're just here at the property today. I know Ann's already kind of given you a little bit of an introduction. So what I'm going to do today is kind of walk what I envision to be the prayer pathway. It's going to be a pathway around both properties. We're getting ready to buy or to purchase the property that's next door to the church. Here's our church here, and this is the back side. We're at the rear of the property of our parking lot, and then over here beyond these woods is the property that we are fixing to purchase to make part of this property. So we're going to have one property that's approximately 22 acres in length and width and depth. And so what I'm going to do today is just kind of walk what I think is going to be the prayer pathway, and I invite you guys to come along with me to see what it looks like. Okay? All right, here we go. So this is one of my favorite areas of the property. This is our retention pond. We actually put this in probably about 5-7 years ago as we completed the backside of this parking lot. The backside of this parking lot, this latter half back here, was part of a construction project to kind of prepare us for where we're moving into the future. We had to have more parking in order to do any more construction or building on this property. We have about 10 acres here that we have been on since 2000. The church here has been in the community since the late 80s, but moved over to this property on the west side of Palm Coast in 2000. And the 10 acres that we currently house on, we built 6 of it out to begin with, and then the last 4 acres, which is this rear parking, is part of that last phase of build out. So we are now ready to build again, and so we are going to be purchasing the property that is next door. Holy Toledo, look over here. I don't know, can you tell? I'm going to zoom in on this as much as we can. There is a big fish in this property. Do you see that fish there in the water? I don't know how to zoom this. Wow, that is really pretty. A big old goldfish there. So we are going to be buying the 12 acres that are next door to our 10 acres to build out the academy, the private school that we have, to bring them back to our property, and then to have church and school on the same property on a 22-acre campus here on the west side of Palm Coast, the city of Palm Coast, Florida. We look forward to the next generation of being able to minister and to grow and to expand the way that the Lord wants us to. So I'm glad you're joining me on our first ever prayer pathway, prayer walk. I envision being able to walk this pathway around the property, on the exterior of the property, probably by the end of the year, and being able to do this with you, with those of you that are local, and joining you virtually for those of you that join us virtually from time to time. So here we go. Let's walk. So right now we are on the west side of the property. This pathway here is on the corner of Palm Coast Parkway. It's the front of our current property, and here's our current property and the church on the front side. We're going to walk all the way down here into the next street, which is where the other property is, and I'll describe that as we go. But this pathway was put in by the city, and it goes from one end to the other and up the east and west sides of the property, which is pretty nice for us, pretty nice for the community, and we'll be able to use this as part of our own purposes as we use the prayer pathway. So I'm going to continue to go. Morning. So on this prayer pathway on our property, I can envision putting some benches, some prayer points, maybe some signage with different scripture, and be able to use this all the way around as a point of worship. As we get fit physically, we can get fit spiritually as well. So this would be about where our current property ends, and then picks up onto the property that we are going to be acquiring here, and then down to the end of the road here. This is a well-used pathway for the community, and I'm looking forward to being able to add some spiritual element to it by putting some signage, some reflection verses, maybe some opportunity to interact via a water station or some sort of cooling station. I tell you, there's a lot of things we can do to be a blessing to our community, even with the property that God is giving us. Even though there's a lot of cars and some activity going on around here, it's still very peaceful, very serene. And I'm looking forward to the spiritual environment that I think this is going to be creating for our people, not only for the church, but for the academy and the academy families as well. I can envision that this prayer pathway and the property itself is going to be a blessing to a whole bunch of people. So here we're at the corner of Palm Coast Parkway and Pine Lakes Parkway, and so now we're going north on Pine Lakes Parkway from Palm Coast Parkway, and the property that we're looking to acquire sits here at the corner. And so we will have 22 acres on the corner of Palm Coast Parkway and Pine Lakes Parkway here at the west side of Palm Coast. What a blessing. So right up here on the left, this is the type of prayer station or rest station that I'm envisioning putting on this prayer pathway around the property. A bench with maybe some shade cover in the trees when the leaves are in, and maybe some scripture signs that are around it for contemplative thought, for rest and respite, both physically and spiritually. Our mission of the church is Christian education and sports ministry. And so this prayer pathway and being able to do this for the community, but also for our own community, our own faith family, really does fit well in with the vision of the church to provide Christian education and sports ministry to this amazing community that God has given us. I know we've been walking for a little while and we're a little more than halfway around the prayer pathway. So now when we do have the prayer pathway and the property, what I will probably do is seek to extend our walk on this path to the end of the property. If you can see the signs that are down at the next driveway, those signs are where the property ends and where we will have a cut through for the prayer pathway as we seek to remain on the perimeter of the property. But today, since there's no cut through path there, today we're going to walk and just stay on the concrete. So we're going to walk in here and just kind of duck up on the parking lot. So, and this is the building that sits on the new property to us, just to the east of our current church property. It is 12 acres, has a 42,000 square foot building on it that used to be an industrial warehouse, and then we've had a church family, sister church, that has used the facility since 2005, and we are going to be moving in here with our academy and just enjoy faith family and partnership with them as we seek to use every square inch of this property. This brings us to the corner of the property, and so has a little canal on the north side, and that runs actually all the way up to our property and beyond. And so this little wet canal here, it's not a wet canal, it's more of a stormwater drain off. Beautiful property, great big oak trees, and just magnificent. It's kind of a park-like effect. Kind of get a park feel back here. So where we're walking right now will most likely be our football field and athletic field for the academy and even for church ministry. And so our journey began when we did the greeting right on the other side of these trees over in the parking lot of the current church facility. And then I can't really walk through there, so this will be the end of our prayer pathway. Peek. That's what we'll call it. A peek at the prayer pathway that's coming soon. So I hope you enjoyed our journey today as we walked around the prayer pathway. When we get this done and as we're continuing to build it, we're gonna put it here on Lautarlife, and we'll put it out on Facebook on the different church websites and school websites, because this is something I believe that not only will be a blessing to us as a church family, but to us as a faith family, also to the community, because this prayer pathway is going to be almost 9/10 of a mile, and so that is going to be a great time. Some of it's going to be wooded, some of it's going to be shaded, some of it's going to be on hard concrete, some of it on mulch pathway. It's going to be a very nice park-like effect. So look forward to seeing you guys soon. God bless you, and until next time, this is Pastor Kevin from Lautarlife.